The morning the billionaire stepped into the regional office, no one knew he was coming. He preferred it that way. He didn't like grand welcomes or people pretending to be busy just because he was around. He believed the truth of a workplace showed itself only when people didn't think the owner was watching. So he arrived quietly, wearing simple clothes, with a calm expression that made him look like an ordinary visitor. He walked through the glass doors without anyone giving him a second look. The office was busy, humming with phones, printers, and people rushing between desks. He took slow steps, observing the small details, how people treated each other, who looked stressed and who looked genuinely focused. These visits always helped him understand whether the company's culture was healthy or if something was wrong beneath the surface. As he moved farther inside, he heard raised voices coming from a closed-door meeting room. At first, he thought it was just a typical workplace disagreement, but there was something sharp in the tone that made him pause. He turned his head slightly, trying not to seem obvious, and listened. Inside the room, a man sounded nervous. His voice trembled in a way that made it clear he was trying hard to stay respectful, even though he sounded scared. The billionaire stayed near the corridor wall. Not close enough to eavesdrop intentionally, but close enough that the voices reached him. "Please, sir. I just need a chance to explain. I've been handling 3 projects at once because the team is short. I did not miss the deadline on purpose." The billionaire noticed the emotion in the man's voice. It wasn't anger, it was worry. Deep worry. Worry of someone who had too much on the line. Another voice answered, loud and impatient. "Excuses again. You always have excuses. The results matter, not your stories. You were told to deliver, and you didn't. That's it." There was a long silence, the kind that only happens when someone is breaking inside. The billionaire didn't move. Something inside him told him to stay exactly where he was. The quieter voice spoke again, trying to stay steady. "Sir, please. I'm doing the work of several people. The team cuts left me with double tasks. If you check the logs, you'll see I stayed late every single day this month. I'm doing my best. I have a child at home. I just need some time." The louder voice responded sharply. "Your personal life is not the company's problem. I don't care about your child. You failed to deliver. That's the end of it." The billionaire's eyebrows rose slightly. He had heard enough. Not caring about an employee's child? That wasn't just unprofessional. It was cold. The billionaire took a slow breath, kept his expression calm, and walked past the door as if he hadn't heard anything at all. But inside, he felt something tightened. As he rounded the corner, he saw through the meeting room's glass wall a man sitting in a chair, shoulders slumped, hands shaking slightly. His face looked tired, not from lack of sleep alone, but from carrying too much responsibility for too long. On the desk in front of him sat a small photograph in a simple frame. The billionaire didn't try to stare. The image was clear enough. A little girl smiling widely, missing one front tooth, standing in front of a school building. That was the man's daughter. The supervisor stood on the opposite side of the room with crossed arms, leaning back like someone proud of his authority. He held a termination letter in his hand. The billionaire walked on, but his eyes kept drifting back. Something felt wrong. Deeply wrong. Instead of heading to the conference room where he was supposed to meet the regional manager, he walked slowly around the office, pretending to be interested in the workplace environment while listening discreetly for any further voices from that room. A moment later, the door opened. The tired man stepped out first, holding a plain white envelope in his hand. His face looked drained, like every bit of hope had slipped out of him. The billionaire noticed the man blink quickly as if trying to stop tears from forming. He wasn't crying for himself. He was crying because he knew he had a child who depended entirely on him. The supervisor followed behind, speaking loudly enough for the nearby workers to hear. "This is what happens when you don't perform. Let this be a lesson to the rest of you. There are no excuses for failure here." Several employees glanced toward the scene but quickly looked away, clearly afraid of the supervisor. Some looked angry but helpless, like they had seen unfair things before but couldn't risk speaking up. Others looked sad for the man who had just lost his job. The billionaire watched closely. He hated seeing people hide their true feelings because of fear. A good company should never make its employees afraid of telling the truth. The man with the envelope walked slowly toward his desk. He sat down heavily, staring at the photo of his daughter. He ran his thumb over the frame gently, like it was the only thing holding him together. Then he started collecting his things. Slowly, carefully, quietly, as if leaving too fast would make everything feel even more real. The billionaire approached the reception desk and asked the receptionist casually, "How long has that gentleman been working here?" The receptionist looked uncomfortable, glancing toward the supervisor before speaking softly. "He's been here 5 years. One of the best workers, honestly. He's never caused trouble." She hesitated. "He's a single father. Works day and night. Everyone respects him," the billionaire responded calmly. "He seems like a dedicated man." The receptionist nodded. "He really is. He's been covering extra shifts ever since 2 people left the team. He always steps in when someone needs help. He never complains." "But the supervisor?" She stopped herself and shook her head. "Never mind." The billionaire didn't push, but he already understood. He walked around the office a little more, quietly observing. When the single father finally finished packing his things, he stood up, took a deep breath, and pressed the photo of his daughter gently against his chest for a moment before placing it safely inside his bag. Then he walked toward the exit, shoulders slightly shaking. The billionaire's heart ached a little. He had been through times in his own life when he felt everything depended on a single outcome. He remembered what fear felt like, the fear of not knowing how to take care of the people you love. He had promised himself long ago that if he ever had the power to help people, he would never look away when someone was being mistreated. As the single father reached the door, the billionaire stepped slightly aside to let him pass. The man gave a polite nod, even though he looked broken inside. The billionaire returned the nod gently, wanting to say something, but realizing it wasn't the right moment. The man needed time to breathe, to calm his mind, to think. But the billionaire had already made up his mind. Once the man left, he turned around and walked straight into the heart of the office. He stopped near the workstations where several employees were whispering among themselves. They immediately fell silent when they saw him standing there. Not because they recognized him, they didn't, but because something about his calm expression made them feel he wasn't an ordinary visitor. "Is everything all right here?" he asked kindly. People exchanged looks. No one wanted to answer. It was clear they were afraid. Finally, a young employee whispered softly, "Sir, things have not been fair lately, but we can't say much. We might lose our jobs." The billionaire nodded gently, not showing any anger or surprise. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I understand." He walked toward the window and took a moment to think. He didn't react emotionally. He didn't call anyone out. He simply observed the whole office, absorbing everything he had just witnessed in those silent seconds. He saw the truth of the place fear in the workers' eyes, exhaustion on their faces, and an invisible weight that only came from unfair treatment. He turned back toward the hall and made his way to the meeting room reserved for the regional head. His steps were calm, but his mind was already working. He had seen enough to know something serious was wrong in this branch, and he knew exactly what he was going to do next, but first he needed to hear the official version of the story. He wanted to see whether people would speak honestly or continue hiding the truth. As he entered the meeting room, he greeted the regional manager politely. The manager stood up quickly, surprised to see him. The billionaire sat down with a composed smile, hiding everything he had witnessed just minutes ago. But deep inside, he wasn't calm. His attention kept returning to the image of the single father holding his daughter's photo. It stayed in his mind like a weight pressing on his heart. He knew that what had happened today wasn't just unfair, it was unacceptable, and although no one knew it yet, the billionaire had already decided that this incident would not end quietly. He was going to get to the bottom of it, and he was going to make sure that what happened to that single father would never happen to anyone in his company again. The regional manager welcomed the billionaire with a stiff smile, the kind of smile that tried too hard to hide nervousness. He had no idea the billionaire had already walked the office floor and seen things he wasn't supposed to see. He knew that the owner rarely visited without warning, and when he did, it usually meant he wanted to inspect something important. The billionaire sat calmly at the long meeting table, his hands folded, eyes gentle but observant. He didn't rush the conversation. Instead, he asked simple questions about the office, how it was performing, how the staff was doing, whether there were any concerns. He listened carefully to every answer. The regional manager gave polished replies, the kind people give when they want everything to appear perfect. Yes, sir. Performance has been strong, he said. The team is efficient. There are occasional mistakes, but nothing out of the ordinary. The billionaire nodded slowly, watching his eyes. How about employee well-being? Any issues you're aware of? The manager shook his head quickly. None, sir. People here work hard and follow procedures. There's very little to worry about. The billionaire took a moment, tapping a finger lightly on the table. He didn't push yet. He didn't reveal anything. Simply said, good. I'll spend the day around the office. I want to understand the team better. The manager nodded again, forcing another smile. Of course, sir. You're welcome to observe anything you like. But the billionaire had already done plenty of observing. He was far from satisfied. He left the meeting room gracefully, walking back into the main office area. Employees saw him, but still didn't know who he truly was. They only knew a quiet visitor was roaming around, watching everything carefully. He moved from desk to desk, pretending to look over charts and schedules, but in truth he was studying people, how they behaved, how they reacted whenever the supervisor walked by. It didn't take long to notice something important. People stiffened when the supervisor came near. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, shoulders tensed, eyes lowered. The atmosphere changed instantly, as if a heavy shadow had passed over them. That was a sign he couldn't ignore. The supervisor moved with a sense of inflated authority, speaking loudly and giving orders to people who were already overwhelmed. He complained about small things. He blamed people for errors that didn't even belong to them. And whenever someone tried to explain something, he waved them off with impatience. The billionaire watched everything quietly. He approached the desk of an older employee who looked tired but kind. She smiled shyly when he stood near her. Hello, the billionaire said softly. Do you mind if I ask a few questions about your work? She glanced cautiously toward the supervisor's office window before answering. No, sir, I don't mind. Are things running smoothly here? He asked. She hesitated, shifting slightly in her chair. We manage, she said, her voice gentle but unsure. He knew that tone. It was the tone of someone trying to speak honestly without getting in trouble. You can tell me the truth, he said quietly. I'm just trying to understand. She looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. People here work very hard. Some things have been difficult lately because of the workload, he asked. She nodded. Yes, many people have left, but their tasks weren't replaced. Others are doing multiple roles now. And she lowered her voice further. The supervisor is strict. Very strict. Sometimes too strict. The billionaire looked at her kindly. Thank you for telling me. I appreciate your honesty. She nodded and returned to her work, relieved but still cautious. He walked over to another small group of workers who were sharing a quiet conversation. When he approached, they straightened up nervously. Please relax, he said with a gentle smile. I just want to ask something simple. Earlier today, a colleague of yours was let go. Is that something that happens often here? The workers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them finally spoke. We don't want to get in trouble. I understand, the billionaire said softly. Whatever you say will stay between us. No. I just want to know if he deserved what happened. A young man lowered his voice to a whisper. No, sir, he didn't. He was one of the best people here. Stayed late every day. He carried the whole team sometimes, another added. He was doing the work of 2 or 3 people. He was never appreciated for it. And the supervisor, the billionaire asked. Their silence told him everything. Finally, someone whispered, he blames people for things they didn't do. Most of us are scared to speak up. The billionaire nodded slowly. Their fear wasn't exaggerated. He had witnessed it himself. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I appreciate your courage." They nodded awkwardly and returned to their tasks. For the next hour, the billionaire examined documents, schedules, and task allocations. He noticed patterns. Workloads were uneven. Tasks were assigned unfairly. Some employees had impossible deadlines, and the fired single father had far more responsibilities than anyone else on the team. He checked the attendance logs on the shared system and saw that the man had clocked out late almost every day for months. Yet there was no recognition, no appreciation, only punishment. The billionaire felt a slow anger building inside him, not the explosive kind, but the calm, controlled anger that came from seeing real injustice. He needed more evidence, and he wanted to hear different perspectives. So he made his way toward the break room. It was quiet, with only one person inside, someone washing a mug at the sink. He looked up slightly when he heard footsteps. "Mind if I join you for a moment?" the billionaire asked. The worker shrugged gently. "Sure." The billionaire sat on the small bench across from him. "I'm trying to understand what happened earlier today," the gentleman who left. "Do you think the decision was fair?" The man put down the mug and sat across from him. He sighed heavily. "If I'm being honest," he said in a low voice, "no, it wasn't fair." He was the only one holding that department together. He helped everyone. He trained new staff without being asked. He covered extra shifts, and he never complained. Then why was he fired? The billionaire asked. The worker leaned back, shaking his head. Because the supervisor needed someone to blame. There was a delayed report this month, but it wasn't even his fault. The supervisor approved a late update, but didn't want to admit it. So he blamed him instead. The billionaire's eyes sharpened slightly. So he was unfairly targeted? Yes, sir, completely. And no one reported this, the billionaire asked. The man laughed sadly. Report? And then what? We'd be next. People here are scared. The billionaire didn't respond immediately, simply absorbed every word. By midday, he had gathered enough understanding to know one thing for certain. Something was deeply wrong at this branch. And the main cause was the supervisor. He treated employees like replaceable objects, not people. He used fear to control them. He punished the hardworking instead of supporting them. The billionaire couldn't tolerate that, but before taking action, he wanted to understand more about the man who had been fired. He asked quietly around the office, speaking to different employees in small conversations, piece by piece. He collected stories of coworkers sharing that the single father skipped lunch often to finish his workload, another saying he always stayed behind to help a colleague who was struggling, another mentioning that he once came to work straight from a hospital visit because he couldn't afford to lose his job. Every story added to a picture of a man who was exhausted yet dedicated, stressed yet determined, struggling yet still giving his best every day. The billionaire felt respect building in his heart. He didn't just see an employee, saw a father fighting for his child. Someone who didn't want sympathy, only fairness. The photo of the little girl flashed in his mind again. He knew he had to find him. In the early afternoon, the billionaire stepped outside to call his personal assistant. He asked her to discreetly pull up the employee record, address, emergency contact, and performance history of the single father. Within minutes, she sent him the details. Everything confirmed what he already knew. Excellent performance reviews, consistent hard work, no history of misconduct, and a note written by a previous manager calling him one of the most dependable members of the team. The billionaire exhaled slowly. The unfairness felt heavier now. He turned back toward the office building, watching employees through the glass walls. They didn't know what he planned. They didn't know who he was. They didn't know that their quiet fear had been seen more clearly than they realized. He went back inside and walked straight to the regional manager's office. "May I ask?" the billionaire said calmly. "What happened earlier with the employee who was dismissed?" The manager blinked, unprepared for the question.
All that?
Yes. Well, he failed to meet a deadline, and the supervisor made the decision. It was in his authority to handle it. "Did you look into the full details before approving it?" the billionaire asked. The manager shifted uncomfortably. "I trust my supervisors, sir. They usually know what they're doing." The billionaire kept his tone gentle. "But did you investigate this case personally?" The manager swallowed, then shook his head. "No, sir. I didn't think it was necessary. The billionaire nodded slowly, his expression making it clear he was thinking deeply. Thank you, he said simply, then stood up. The manager watched him leave with a growing sense of unease. The billionaire returned to the main office floor and stood in the center, looking around quietly. He watched the faces, the tired eyes, the tense shoulders, the forced silence. He watched the supervisor giving orders without care for how overwhelmed people were. He watched the staff follow instructions with fear instead of confidence. He had seen enough. His decision was made. He would not let this end with a man losing his job unfairly. He would not let a supervisor continue ruling through fear. And he would not allow a company he built with compassion to become a place where people were treated poorly. He took a final look at the office, memorizing every detail. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. He was going to find the single father. He was going to hear his side of the story directly. And after that, everything in this company was going to change, not just for one employee, but for everyone. The billionaire left the office building with a firm purpose in his steps, though he kept his expression calm. The air outside was cool, with a light breeze that carried the sounds of traffic and distant voices. He paused near the sidewalk, letting his mind settle as he looked at the information his assistant had sent him. It included the single father's address, his department, and a brief summary of his employment history. Everything in the file matched the impression the billionaire had formed earlier. A hardworking man who had been overwhelmed by responsibilities that should never have fallen solely on him. But there was no mention of complaints. No warnings, no issues with behavior, only dedication written in quiet lines. He tucked the phone back into his pocket and walked to the car waiting at the curb. His driver stepped out to open the door, but the billionaire raised a hand gently. No need, he said. I'll sit in the front today. The driver nodded without question. The billionaire preferred simplicity when he traveled like this, especially when he didn't want attention. As the car pulled away from the office, he looked out the window, watching the city rush by in a blur of buildings, shops, and people going about their lives. His thoughts, however, stayed with the man he had seen earlier, head lowered, shoulders tired. Clutching the photo of his little girl, he couldn't shake the image. Take me to the address I sent you, he said quietly. The driver nodded and changed direction. The neighborhood they entered wasn't poor, but it wasn't fancy either. It was the kind of place where people lived modest lives, small apartment buildings, narrow streets, children playing outside, a few small shops on corners. People passed by with groceries, backpacks, or strollers. It felt peaceful, but also full of stories. When the car stopped in front of a simple apartment building, the billionaire stepped out slowly, taking a moment to look around. Laundry hung on some balconies. A couple of bicycles leaned against a railing. A child's ball rolled across the pathway as two kids chased after it. He liked places like this. They felt real. He walked up the small set of stairs and entered the building. The hallway smelled faintly of old paint and someone cooking rice one floor up. He checked the apartment number and made his way down the corridor. When he reached the door, he paused. He didn't know how the man would react. Losing a job was painful, especially for someone carrying so much responsibility alone. But the billionaire knew one thing. He had to try. He knocked softly. There was a moment of silence, then footsteps. Slow, tired footsteps. The door opened slightly, just enough for the man to look out. His eyes widened with confusion when he saw the billionaire standing there. "Hello?" the billionaire said gently. The man blinked, clearly surprised. He looked as if he had been crying earlier, though he tried to hide it. "Can I help you?" the man asked softly. "I'm sorry to disturb you," the billionaire replied. "I met you earlier today at the office." "You may not have noticed me," the man hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, I remember seeing you. You were walking past." "I came because I wanted to check on you," the billionaire said. "May I come in for a moment?" The man looked uncertain. His eyes flickered with worry, then with politeness. Finally, he stepped aside. "Yes, please come in." The apartment was small, but clean. Toys were arranged neatly in a corner, though a few crayons were scattered on the floor. A little backpack hung on a hook near the door. On the small dining table lay a worksheet with handwriting that looked like a child's please. "Sit," the man said quietly. The billionaire sat down on a simple chair. The man sat across from him, hands folded, still looking unsure. "I hope you don't mind me coming here," the billionaire said softly. The man shook his head. I'm just surprised. People don't usually visit without a reason." "I have a reason," the billionaire replied. "I saw what happened today, and I wanted to understand what you went through." The man swallowed hard and looked down at his hands. He stayed silent for a long moment. The billionaire didn't rush him. Finally, the man spoke. "I didn't think anyone noticed." "I did," the billionaire said quietly. The man nodded weakly, then sighed. "I didn't expect to lose my job. I've always tried my best. I know I made mistakes sometimes, but I never slacked off. I worked late whenever needed. I took responsibility for everything." His voice shook slightly, but it didn't matter today. The billionaire leaned forward. "Can you tell me what happened?" "From your point of view?" The man closed his eyes briefly as if gathering courage. "I tried to meet the deadline," he said. "I truly did, but the tasks were too many. After they cut down the team, I was handling things that used to be done by 2 or 3 people. I stayed late every night last week. My daughter kept asking why I wasn't home. I barely slept." He rubbed his forehead. "I knew the deadline was tight, but I still believed I could fulfill it. When I realized it would be late, I told the supervisor ahead of time. I showed him everything. He told me it was fine, said he understood." The billionaire felt his jaw tighten slightly. The man continued, "But today he acted like I was making excuses. Like I didn't care. He said I always failed to deliver. But I've never missed a deadline before. Not once." The billionaire nodded slowly. "Did he ever acknowledge your extra work?" The man shook his head. "No, he only pointed out flaws, and I didn't want to argue. I needed the job. I needed the income. My daughter, she depends on me." He pointed at the photo frame on the shelf, a little girl with bright eyes and a big smile. The billionaire's eyes softened. "She's beautiful." The man smiled faintly. "She's my whole world." His voice cracked. "I don't know how I'm going to tell her I lost my job." The billionaire took a slow breath. "You shouldn't have been fired." The man looked up, surprised. You think so?" "I know so," the billionaire said firmly. "I saw the way you worked. I saw how people spoke about you. You were treated unfairly." The man blinked rapidly, trying not to show the emotion rising in him. "I'm just one worker," he whispered. "People like me. We don't have a voice." The billionaire leaned forward slightly. "Everyone deserves fairness, and everyone deserves respect." The man looked at him closely now, as if seeing something different in him. "Who exactly are you?" he asked quietly. The billionaire paused, then spoke gently. "I own the company." The man's breath caught. His eyes widened, and he sat straighter. Shocked. "I didn't want people to know who I was today," the billionaire continued. "I prefer to see things as they are, not as people pretend them to be." The man stared at him, speechless. "And what I saw," the billionaire said softly, "was wrong. Very wrong." The man lowered his head. "I didn't expect. I never thought." "You've been carrying too much alone," the billionaire said gently. "More than any one person should. And instead of support, you received punishment." He paused. "That won't stand." The man looked at him with a mix of disbelief and hope. The billionaire continued. "I came here today not to talk about what went wrong, but to ask you something important." The man blinked. "Ask me what?" "I want to understand what you need," the billionaire said. "Not for the company's sake, but for your life, for your daughter, for your future." The man stared at him, stunned. "Nobody has ever asked me that," he whispered. "Well," the billionaire said with a small smile, "then let me be the first." The man took a deep breath, tears pooling in his eyes. "I just want stability," he said quietly. "I want to earn enough to take care of my daughter. I want to work hard without being treated like I'm nothing. I want to feel like what I do matters. The billionaire nodded slowly. That's not too much to ask. The man wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, the billionaire said. You're being honest. That's more important than anything. The room fell quiet for a moment. The billionaire looked around the small table, the toys, the backpack, the signs of a life built with love and struggle. Finally, he spoke again. If you're willing, he said gently, I can help. The man looked up startled. Help? How? I can bring you back, the billionaire said. Not just to your old position, to a place where you'll be supported, appreciated, and treated with respect. The man's lips parted slightly in disbelief, and the billionaire added, I need your help too. My help? The man repeated. The billionaire nodded. If I'm going to fix what's broken in that office, I need someone who understands it from the inside. Someone honest. Someone hardworking. Someone who's seen how things truly run. The man looked deeply moved. You want me? To help fix the office? Yes, the billionaire said. If you're willing. The man swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything now, the billionaire replied softly. Just think about it. The man nodded slowly, overwhelmed. The billionaire stood, preparing to leave. I'll return tomorrow, he said. We'll talk again. And no matter what, I promise you something. What happened today won't be forgotten. The man stood as well. Still stunned? Thank you, he whispered. His voice shaking, the billionaire gave him a warm nod. Take care of your daughter tonight. She needs you. As he walked toward the door, the little girl's laughter echoed faintly from the next room, as if on cue. The billionaire smiled softly. He stepped outside, letting the door close gently behind him. The sun was setting. Casting warm light across the buildings, he took a deep breath. Tomorrow, everything would begin to change. For the single father, for the entire office, and for the company itself. The call came early the next morning, long before most people were awake. The billionaire sat in his quiet office, the sky still dim outside the tall windows. He had not slept much. The events of the previous day kept replaying in his mind, especially the look on the single father's face when security escorted him out. It bothered him more than he expected. Something about the man's quiet sadness, his tired but determined voice, stayed with him. He felt a responsibility he couldn't ignore. He opened the employee file that lay on his desk. There were pages of work history, performance notes, and glowing comments from past supervisors. It was clear the man had always given more than required. There were mentions of overtime, last-minute help, and stepping in when others called in sick. As he flipped through the papers, he saw gentle reminders of the man's life's small details that told a bigger story. A note about needing mornings off for a school meeting. A mention of leaving early one day because his daughter had a fever. Tiny hints of a parent doing his best. The billionaire leaned back in his chair and breathed deeply. He wasn't someone who normally got emotional over employee issues, but this felt different. It felt wrong on a human level. He looked out at the quiet city, the streetlights fading as dawn approached, and made a decision. He would meet the man personally before dealing with anyone else. He wanted to hear his side. Not through reports or office gossip, but directly from him. He asked his assistant to get the man's phone number. The assistant hesitated, thinking it was unusual, but he didn't question it. Within minutes, the billionaire had the contact information. He typed a message, paused, erased it, then tried again. He didn't want to sound formal or cold. Finally, he wrote a simple message, asking if they could meet that morning. When he hit send, he felt strangely nervous. The single father woke up to the sound of his phone vibrating on the table beside him. He had fallen asleep on the couch, still wearing yesterday's clothes. His daughter was asleep in the small bedroom across the hall. He rubbed his eyes and looked at the phone. The message surprised him. It was polite, but firm, asking to meet. He didn't know what to think. Was something wrong? Was there more trouble? Or was this a chance for him to explain? He whispered a quick hope under his breath and accepted the meeting. He got ready quietly, taking care not to wake his daughter. He placed a small note near her pillow, telling her he would be back soon and that breakfast was in the kitchen. The girl, still young enough to cling to every word her father wrote, always read his notes with care. He locked the door, took a deep breath, and made his way to the meeting place. When he arrived, he found the billionaire waiting at a small cafe rather than a fancy office. It surprised him. The man he expected to see in a suit and surrounded by assistants sat alone with a cup of tea, wearing a simple sweater. Their eyes met, and the billionaire stood up to greet him. "Thank you for coming," he said gently. The single father nodded, unsure of what to do with his hands or where to focus his eyes. He sat down slowly. The billionaire didn't start with questions. Instead, he asked about his daughter. The man hesitated but answered honestly. He spoke about the girl's school, her love for drawing, and the way she always worried when he came home late. Talking about her eased his tension a little. After a few minutes, the billionaire leaned forward and spoke in a calm tone. "I want to understand what happened yesterday. I saw how things unfolded, but I want to hear it from you." The man looked down, his fingers gripping the edge of his cup. He talked about the extra workload, the late nights, and the pressure that had been building. He explained how he tried to handle everything, because he couldn't risk losing his job. He didn't complain or blame anyone. He just explained the facts with quiet honesty. As he spoke, the billionaire felt a deep respect for him. There was no bitterness in his voice, only exhaustion and a sense of carrying too much alone. When he finished, he apologized for speaking for so long, worried he had said too much. The billionaire shook his head. "You didn't say too much. You said the truth, and I appreciate it." He then told the father what he had seen: the unfair behavior, the rushed decision, the lack of proper evaluation. He didn't hide anything. He wanted the man to know that he wasn't ignored, that someone saw what happened and cared enough to act. The man's eyes widened. He never expected someone so high up to pay attention to a situation like his. When the billionaire said he wanted to offer him his job back, the man looked shocked. And when he offered him a better position, the man stared at him in silence, unsure if he had heard correctly. "You don't owe me anything," the man whispered. The billionaire shook his head. "This isn't charity. This is correcting a mistake." The man lowered his gaze. His shoulders trembled slightly, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time in many days, he felt hope. They talked for a long time. The billionaire asked about his goals, his strengths, and the things he wished he could improve. The conversation felt more like an understanding between two human beings than a meeting between a boss and an employee. There was no judgment, no pressure. The billionaire wanted to make sure whatever position he gave him would help him grow, not overwhelm him. When the meeting ended, the billionaire stood up and shook his hand firmly. He assured him that everything would be taken care of, and that he would personally oversee the process. The man nodded repeatedly, still overwhelmed, as they walked out of the cafe together. The billionaire noticed the man pause at the window display of a small stationery shop nearby. Inside were colorful notebooks and drawing kits for children. The billionaire didn't say anything, but the father's soft smile told him everything. It reminded him again why this mattered. He returned to his office with renewed focus. He asked for a full review of the department and requested files on workplace complaints, performance evaluations, and staffing issues. His assistant looked surprised, but followed the instructions carefully. The billionaire read through the documents and grew more serious with every page. There were patterns, small things that pointed to a bigger issue. The supervisor who fired the single father had similar problems with other employees. There were warnings that hadn't been addressed, complaints that went unnoticed. Things had slipped through the cracks. He didn't react immediately. Instead, he observed quietly throughout the day. He walked through the office floor again, noting the expressions of the employees, the nervous glances they shared, and the cautious tones they used whenever the supervisor walked by. Something was clearly wrong. This wasn't just about one man losing his job. It was about a culture that needed change. Later in the afternoon, the billionaire called for a small meeting with the upper management team. He didn't raise his voice or show anger. He simply laid the facts on the table, politely but firmly. He asked them why these issues weren't handled correctly. Some avoided eye contact, some tried to give excuses, and others admitted they hadn't noticed. He listened to everything without interruption. When they finished, he explained how the company needed to function not just in terms of profit, but in terms of fairness. A company is made of people, he said. If the people are mistreated, the company loses its soul. His words landed heavily in the room. By the end of the meeting, it was clear. Things would change. Processes would be reviewed, supervisors would be retrained, and proper checks would be put in place. The billionaire wasn't going to let another hardworking employee suffer quietly. That night, he sat in his office alone again, thinking of the single father and his little girl. He imagined her finding his note in the morning and smiling. He imagined the relief on her father's face when he told her everything was okay now. These thoughts pushed him to work even harder. The next day, when the father returned to the office to complete the paperwork for his new role, he walked with a mix of pride and nerves. People stared, whispered, and smiled. Some nodded at him gently, relieved he was back. The billionaire greeted him at the door and introduced him to a new team that welcomed him warmly. For a moment, the man felt his throat tighten. He wasn't used to kindness at this level, but he breathed deeply, held his shoulders straight, and stepped into his new chapter. The billionaire watched him walk down the hallway with a quiet satisfaction. He knew he had done the right thing, but he also knew this wasn't the end of the journey. More changes were needed, and he intended to make them. Deep down, he hoped this moment would be a reminder to himself, to his staff, and to anyone who watched silently that fairness mattered, even when it was inconvenient. Especially then. And so, the path toward change began, not with anger or force, but with a conversation between two people who simply wanted to do right. The billionaire closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the decision settle. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, he felt a quiet peace, because sometimes, doing what is right starts with noticing what others overlook, choosing to act anyway. The sun rose slowly over the city, casting a golden glow on the tall buildings and the busy streets below. The billionaire sat quietly in his office, looking out the window as the city woke up. He felt calmer than he had in days, but he knew the real work was still ahead. His decision to help the single father had opened his eyes to problems he had not noticed before. Now, he felt a deep responsibility to make things right, not just for one person, but for everyone who worked under his company's name. He spent the morning going through old files, reports and employee feedback that had been ignored for too long. For years, small complaints had slipped through the cracks. Some employees felt unseen, unheard, and afraid to speak up. The billionaire realized that the company had grown so fast that somewhere along the way, the human side had been forgotten. He made a quiet promise to himself that he would fix this. Later that day, he called for a meeting with all regional managers. It was a large group, and most of them were nervous. They had never been summoned on such short notice before. When they entered the room, they found the billionaire standing at the front, not sitting behind a desk. He wanted to speak to them on the same level. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice steady but gentle. "There is something important we need to talk about." The room fell silent. Some managers shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to expect. "I recently witnessed an employee being treated unfairly," he continued. "It made me look deeper into our system. What I found was worrying. We have lost sight of something very important to our people. This company is not just buildings and numbers. It is the people who show up every day, who give their time and energy to keep it running. If they are not treated fairly, we fail as leaders." The managers exchanged uneasy glances. Some looked down at their shoes. Others folded their arms, listening closely. The billionaire took a deep breath. "So today, things will change. Not tomorrow. Not next month. Today." He walked to the whiteboard and started writing. His handwriting was firm and clear. He turned back to the group. "These changes are not suggestions. They are the new rules." Some managers looked relieved. Others looked nervous. But all of them understood the seriousness in his tone. One manager raised a hand timidly. "Sir, What brought all this on so suddenly? The billionaire paused. He looked around the room, then answered simply, "A man lost his job unfairly." And it opened my eyes. He didn't mention the single father's struggles or the little girl who waited at home. He didn't need to. The truth was clear. A leader must care about the people who work under him. After the meeting, the managers left the room talking quietly among themselves. Some felt inspired. Some felt challenged. But every single one of them knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter for the company. The billionaire stayed behind, looking at the list on the whiteboard. He felt a small but meaningful sense of accomplishment. He knew it was only the first step, but it was a necessary one. Meanwhile, the single father was settling into his new role. His first week had been filled with nervous excitement. Every time someone welcomed him with a smile or congratulated him, he felt warmth in his chest. He hadn't experienced kindness like this at work for a long time. His new office wasn't big or fancy, but to him it felt like a fresh start. He placed a small photo of his daughter on the desk. The picture showed her smiling at a school event, holding a drawing she had made. It reminded him of why he worked so hard every day. On his second day in the new position, he received a message from the billionaire asking if he could join a small meeting. He hesitated for a moment, nervous, but then replied yes. When he entered the meeting room, he found the billionaire and a few senior managers waiting. They all stood up to greet him. The respect they showed him made his heart tighten slightly. "I wanted you here," the billionaire said, "because you helped us see something important. Your situation showed me the flaws in our system, and your honesty gave me the courage to fix it." The man was surprised. "I didn't do anything special," he said quietly. "You did," the billionaire insisted. "You told the truth. And you stayed strong even when things were unfair. That takes courage." The managers nodded in agreement. The billionaire continued, "We're making changes. Real changes. And I want you to be part of shaping our new employee support panel. You've lived through the flaws. You understand what needs to be fixed." The father stared at him in disbelief. "Me? Are you sure?" "Yes," the billionaire said without hesitation. "Your voice matters. Your experience matters. And I trust you to speak for people who feel unheard." The man swallowed hard. He felt a mix of pride and fear. He had never been given such responsibility before. But the billionaire's calm confidence eased his worries. "I'll do my best," he said. "That's all I ask." The billionaire replied with a warm smile. Over the next few weeks, the company began to transform. Employees noticed the changes almost immediately. The atmosphere felt lighter. People spoke more freely. Supervisors acted more thoughtfully. The new policies gave workers a sense of protection they had never felt before. Some employees, who had been struggling quietly now, felt safe to share their concerns. Others expressed ideas that had been ignored for years. Small problems that once created frustration were now being solved. The single father grew into his new role with confidence. He worked closely with the panel, listening to people, helping them communicate better, and guiding them through situations he understood all too well. Many employees thanked him privately. He became a quiet symbol of hope for those who felt overlooked. One evening, the billionaire made an unannounced visit to the office again. He liked to check in quietly, not to catch people off guard, but to see things as they truly were. When he walked in, he noticed employees smiling, speaking openly, and working with ease. It felt different from before. Better, he found the father sitting with a new employee, listening patiently to a concern she had. The way he nodded, encouraged, and guided her made the billionaire feel proud. This was exactly what he hoped would happen, a workplace where people looked out for each other. When the father finished speaking with the employee, the billionaire walked over. "How are you settling in?" he asked. The man smiled gently. "It's been good. Better than I ever expected." "You're doing well," the billionaire said. "I've seen the feedback. People trust you." The father lowered his gaze humbly. "I just want people to feel safe. That's all." The billionaire nodded. "And that's exactly why I asked you to help. You understand what it means to be treated fairly." You understand what it means to struggle quietly. That makes you strong." They stood there for a moment, looking out at the busy office. The billionaire felt grateful for the unexpected lesson life had given him. Before leaving, he said something he had wanted to say for weeks. "You didn't just get your job back. You helped change this company forever." The man looked at him, surprised, and then smiled. A real, heartfelt smile. When he went home that night, he told his daughter all about his new responsibilities and how things were changing. She listened wide-eyed, smiling proudly. She hugged him tightly and said, "I knew you could do it." Her words filled him with a warmth he couldn't describe. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the company's new culture grew stronger. Employees felt heard. Managers became more thoughtful. Problems were fixed before they became crises. And at the heart of these changes was a simple lesson, a reminder that fairness matters, and that a single act of compassion can transform more than one life, the billionaire often thought. Back to the moment he witnessed the unfair firing. Had he stayed silent, nothing would have changed. But choosing to act, choosing to listen, choosing to care, that made all the difference. In the end, it wasn't a grand gesture or a dramatic announcement that changed the company. It was the quiet decision of one person to do what was right. And because of that, a father found hope, a daughter found stability, a company found its heart again.